Good morning. I have some morning time. Hey, I'm going to use it. I really, why waste my time on YouTube when I could be making YouTube for you to waste your time on? That's my motto. All right, continuing. A little backtrack here. Sargent does not claim that every single person can be brainwashed. He excludes certain categories of the mentally ill whose emotions are so impossible to arouse, or who are so disconnected from their feelings that they cannot be brought to collapse. Such people cannot be made to abract in hospitals, for instance. However, he does say, in connection with brainwashing, granted that the right pressure is applied in the right way, and for long enough, ordinary prisoners have little chance of staving off collapse. Only the exceptional or mentally ill person is likely to resist over very long periods. Ordinary people, who are the way they are simply because they are sensitive to and influenced by what is going on around them. It is the lunatic who can be so impervious to suggestion. That's awesome. I guess that means Zen creates lunatics. Welcome to the club. Can be so impervious to suggestion. Psychological factors in the brainwashing process are not ignored by Sargent. He considers the guilt, isolation, physical weakening, etc. are all a vital part of the build-up to intolerance level. But conversion experience itself he sees as due to the physiological events happening in the brain, an inevitability of our physical makeup. He therefore offers different explanations for the actions which others see as based in our emotional drives and needs as human personalities. He suggests, for instance, that one of the more horrible consequences of interrogations where the victims suddenly start to feel great affection for the interrogator who has been treating them ruthlessly is a warning sign that the ultra-paradoxical stage of abnormal brain activity may have been reached. A subspace. I call it a subspace. It's a term. The victim likes instead of hates his persecutor. Others, already mentioned, tend to put such seemingly contradictory behavior down to the fact that human beings need warmth and attention from at least someone. And if the interrogator is the only one around to provide it, then his will have to do. Ian McKenzie, writing on hostage-captor relationships in Bulletin of the British Psychological Society, thinks that Aronson's gain-loss theory may also have some bearing. The theory suggests that increases in positive, rewarding behavior from another person have more impact on someone than consistent, unvarying approval. Respecting or liking has to be won, and it cannot be taken for granted. Therefore, when it is given in any little way, it means more, or has more immediate effect than liking that exists regardless. Sargent has been much attacked from many quarters for his firm adherence to a psychological explanation for brainwashing and sudden conversion, and the kind of examples of behavior that he uses to support it. Psychologist T.H. Pear, in The Molding of Modern Man, makes a lyrical objection. He doesn't mention Sargent by name, but his approach is clearly covered by the criticism and battle for the mind is listed in this biography. I'm a bad reader today. Pear said, "The inventor of the term brainwashing deserves no thanks from anyone trying to understand the techniques. Some ham-handed, some astute but sporadic, and others cleverly integrated, which are given that name. The word, misleadingly descriptive, attracts those who believe that the only way to unravel the mind's workings is to grasp the activities of the brain, presumably to explain the physical events occurring when a gramophone record is played, may lay bare the whole story of Verdi's Requiem, including his temperament and the religion which inspired him, not to mention the mental processes of the singers and the conductor." James A.C. Brown, a British psychologist who died in 1964, also thought that Sargent was rather short on acknowledgement that there is a man behind the brain cells. His own starting point, in his techniques of persuasion, is the belief that people's attitudes in life are not all of the same strength and permanency by their very nature. Only some attitudes can be changed by other people, others never. The deep attitudes are those which develop from an early age and create a perspective on life which rarely alters. The less entrenched attitudes are those that might more correctly be called opinions, and which are much more amenable to alteration. Furthermore, what may seem to be radical changes in a person's beliefs are in fact most likely in keeping with their basic character anyway. Brown says, "Opinions are but briefly held and likely to reflect current public feeling. In many cases, they reflect rather what the individual thinks that he should feel than what, in fact, he does feel. They are readily changed and may be susceptible either to propaganda or to reasoned argument. Attitudes, on the other hand, are likely to be long-lived and do not necessarily reflect the feelings of the general public, although they tend to reflect those of some group with which the individual has become associated. Ordinarily, they are rooted in character traits which cause the individual to select from the flood of stimuli constantly impinging upon his senses only those which are consistent with his own deep-rooted beliefs. Although they are capable of changes which are quite real in the social sense, these changes are apt to be more apparent than profound. Thus, the change from communism to fascism, or, in the field of religion, Roman Catholicism, is quite real socially in that these bodies proclaimed vastly different doctrines which result entirely divergent behavior. But emotionally, and from the standpoint of character, all are on the same level on the authoritarian democratic scale, because all share the same attitude toward authority." Wow. I'm not reading very good. It's time to learn as we go. The character of academic books reads entirely different than other books, so forgive us. We know not what we do. Therefore, when he talks specifically about brainwashing, he says, "Despite their great doctrinal differences, all forms of totalism are brothers under the skin and appeal to the same type of persons, and those converted by brainwashing in any final sense are converted not in spite of, but because of themselves." Brown, while acknowledging the value of Pavlov's findings, about stress behavior rejects the interpretation put on them by those keen to show that brainwashing techniques can literally reverse human behavior. He finds even Pavlov's assertions suspect in this area. For instance, it is such an inexplicable and sudden reversal of behavior for a dog which liked a laboratory assistant and then gets tormented by him in experiments to turn against him afterward. See, I can't read out loud. Let me rewrite this sentence. He finds even Pavlov's assertions suspect in this area. For instance, is it such an inexplicable and sudden reversal of behavior for a dog which liked a laboratory assistant and then gets tormented by him in experiments to turn against him afterward? Similarly, he finds suspect cases cited by Pavlovian disciples to prove the same things happen in humans. A woman who suddenly wants to kill the child she loves doesn't manifest such feelings out of the blue. They were in some form all along and were kept repressed until they overflowed into consciousness, he says. The Reverend Ian Ramage is upset by what he sees. The Reverend Ian Ramage is upset by what he sees as Sargent's somewhat overgenerous application of Pavlovian findings to events in the ordinary world. He finds large structural flaws in Sargent's readings, particularly as regards Sargent's claim that the religious conversion syndrome is all due to goings-on in the brain cortex. Wow. I'm apologizing for my reading today. How am I going to share knowledge if I can't even read knowledge? Of course, it is in his particular interest to disprove such a connection, but his reasoning is clear and worth consideration. In his Battle for the Free Mind, he makes a distinction between breakdown and emotional application, whereas Sargent appears to link them. Quote, in the traumatic experiences which lead to battle neurosis and the terrors deliberately imposed in brainwashing, we may well have processed roughly parallel to the experimental stress situations imposed on Pavlov's dogs, resulting in various stages of abnormal behavior and culminating in terminal exhaustion and collapse. However, it must be pointed out that nowhere in these experiments with dogs, as described either by Dr. Sargent or by Pavlov himself, do we see anything that looks like an emotional application. The abnormal behavior of Pavlov's dogs was always the direct result of imposed stresses, not of the release or acting out of pent-up emotion. To restore them after breakdown, Pavlov's dogs were never treated actively, but were given simple sedation. Fact is that emotional application simply will simply not fit in at all into the Pavlovian formula of breakdown under stress, because it is psychologically and dynamically the exact opposite of such a process. It is the recovery from breakdown. When we inquire what are the common features of both breakdown and recovery, which led Dr. Sargent to see both processes as amenable to similar explanations, we find that both involve something which can be described as collapse, and both involve striking changes in behavior. However, an examination of Dr. Sargent's own evidence will show that very clearly the changes in behavior involved in the two processes are exactly opposite, in that the respective contexts of breakdown and reactive recovery, the word collapse means two entirely different things. The collapse, which supervenes as a result of intolerable strain, is a condition which endures for some time and is manifest in breakdown, restriction of personality, debilitating symptoms, and patterns of abnormal behavior. The collapse that supervenes at the end of an emotional application is a comparatively short-lived physical exhaustion resulting from violent emotional discharge. It soon passes quite spontaneously to be followed at once by healing, liberation of personality, and the disappearance of neurotic symptoms and abnormal behavior patterns. Rummage is referring in the last sentence above to the experience of the shell-shocked soldiers. He comments on the fact that Sargent seems to think that the violent emotional experience of Pavlov's dogs in the flood serving to wipe out. Oh my gosh. I quit. We don't get this video today. Goodbye.